Story 1. We develop human resources software, not Automatic Data Processing Incorporated, but one of the other large vendors. We have tools that prompt recruiters to send rejection emails, but most ignore them because humans are lazy. A few customers configure the system to send rejection emails to all unselected applicants, but they are a small minority. It is hard enough to get recruiters to close filled, retracted, or delayed requisitions. If our automatic pruning did not purge them after 90 days, they would have positions listed from 2018. I am sure of it. Story 2. Recruiter, I do not because that is the job of the hiring manager. Hiring manager, I do not because that is the job of the recruiter. Story 3. It is particularly ridiculous when there are multiple interviews. A month ago, my child completed 4 interviews with a company and then the company ghosted them. There should be a law against that. Story 4. So that if the person they want cancels, they can tell the runner-up that they were the first choice and so on down the line until they finally get someone. Some of them enjoy being assholes and take pleasure in giving people false hope. Story 5. It is disappointing when an interview goes well and you feel positive, but they choose someone else. Feels like a kick to the gut. Story 6. I interviewed for a different position about a year ago. I thought the interview went well, but I did not hear anything. Keep in mind that this was internal. I was an information technology support specialist, and we handled all the new employee onboarding. My team received a standard email about a new employee. However, the position listed was the one I had applied for. Nobody told me I did not get the position, despite the fact that the hiring manager sat 2 desks behind me. The hiring manager would walk past my desk at least a dozen times a day. They even used my name when describing where the new employee's desk would be. Fuck this ghosting culture. Story 7. From what I know, it is usually not malice but messy systems and bad habits. Many teams do not have a clean way to mark a candidate as rejected in their applicant tracking system without triggering a form letter that the legal department wants to review, so the decision gets delayed. Recruiters juggle 30 to 60 roles, and when a hiring manager stalls, recruiters stall as well. Some companies also worry that a rejection could spark public complaints or coordinated review attacks, so they default to silence. Story 8. I do not ghost candidates who have two-way interactions with the company. If we have phone screened you, had you visit the team on site, or sent a take-home assessment, you will receive a clear yes or no response from me. Sometimes that will be an automated template from the applicant tracking system if we are early in the interview process, and always a direct message from me if we have had back-and-forth communication. I cannot extend that level of personal response to all applicants. The last time we opened a role, we received a few hundred applicants on the first day. I sort through those, send interview requests to candidates who look promising, and use the applicant tracking system rejection template for everyone else. I try to reject on a rolling basis. Most applicants receive a yes or no within a week of applying, and all applicants receive a yes or no within a few days of the role closing. Story 9. I do a bit of hiring, not in human resources, but I am very involved in who gets hired on my team. There are a couple of things going on. First, 95% of applicants are so wildly unqualified that I assume they adopted a spray and pray approach. I do not engage with these applications. They are deleted. Second, if someone is a strong candidate but not the top candidate, we sometimes delay sending a rejection until the preferred candidate is hired. The top candidate is often applying elsewhere, and I cannot be sure we will get them. When I do hire, I always call the real contenders, not only because it is the right thing to do, but also because I may want to hire them in the future. However, if I am in a lengthy hiring and negotiation process with one candidate, the others can feel like they have been ghosted. This is unfortunate, but often unavoidable. Third, if something goes seriously wrong in an interview, I do not want to provoke a negative reaction. While many people say they want feedback, in truth 80% of recipients treat it as an opportunity to rebut. I have had bad experiences with people becoming hostile, so if there is a stark reason a person must be removed from the process, I sometimes leave them in the void. Story 10. Not sure how human resources operates across different companies, but anecdotally, when the last job I worked at opened an engineering role, we received about 2,000 applications in 3 days, and it was not even a well-known company. Unless you are getting automated rejection letters, it is likely human resources stops after the first few promising candidates in their inbox because it is overwhelming. Story 11. I did this when I first started in human resources because I never had the process explained to me. I always replied if the candidate reached out, but if they did not, I let it lie. I told my husband, and he said it was wrong not to follow up, so I went back to everyone I had ghosted and let them know we had moved on. Now I am very particular about making sure everyone gets a follow-up. I was just stupid, to be honest. Story 12. I guess they don't have time. A few months ago, I heard a company was hiring for about a dozen positions and received a few thousand applications. Story 13. My employer's human resources department will not allow us to. They do nothing with the hiring process beyond posting an inaccurate job description. They put us in charge of ranking applicants, interviewing everyone, and conducting background and reference checks. The hiring manager may only contact the person offered the position and any internal full-time applicants who were not selected. All other internal part-time and external applicants hear nothing for 8 weeks until Human Resources sends a generic, "We went with someone else" email, if they are lucky. This has happened to multiple part-time staff who have been seeking full-time positions for several years. It is incredibly frustrating for me because I would promote them if I were the hiring manager. And it is devastating for them when their own employer does not even give them the courtesy of a phone call. Story 14. It is unfortunate, but I can understand it. Another man and I were both applying for the full-time position for which we had been working part-time. I got the job. My boss, in an unusual moment of poor judgment, joked that they had given the job to the younger man. I think he was trying to be sympathetic because it is hard for older people to get hired, but his comment resulted in a lawsuit alleging age discrimination. The other man was rude, and objectively it was the right decision to hire me because I was much better at the job. It was still difficult for him. Story 15. I always send an email after an interview, but I cannot possibly correspond with everyone who submits an application. That would be a part-time job in itself. Story 16. If you do not have an automated system to notify all applicants when a position is filled, you are not a serious company. Story 17. Employers will ghost this post as thoroughly as they ghost applicants. Story 18. If they never reject you, you cannot sue them for improper rejection because they can always claim they never rejected you. Story 19. People who post on AskReddit, why do you ask questions of groups you dislike and who clearly will not answer? Story 20. Human resources recruiters should follow protocols. Hiring managers are often overwhelmed. These protocols may vary and can include giving one standard answer to everyone. Story 21. Please have some class and send at least a basic form letter. Comes across as unprofessional and unpleasant. Story 22. When I was hiring, some candidates were acceptable, but I waited until the best candidate started their first day. If the best candidate bailed, I contacted the second best candidate and so on. So I kept backup candidates. Story 23. I will have my team review this and we will be in touch with an answer. Story 24. Please say why. I hate being unsure whether I will get a job. I have not messaged many places because there is not much available for a teen without transportation that also lists contact information. But I have messaged one place and received no response. I think I will just take a job at Walmart. Story 25. I always thought it was for legal or liability reasons. It is better to say nothing and not open up any avenues for lawsuits. Story 26. Applicants? Who cares? Each posting gets thousands of applicants, most not even qualified according to the job description. Some companies send out boilerplate responses, but many smaller ones without that technology do not. Unless you can automate rejections, it is not humanly possible to inform all applicants individually. However, people who were interviewed in any capacity, including a basic phone screen from Human Resources, deserve proper follow-up. If you have gone through multiple interviews and become one of 2 final candidates and then are ghosted, you should name and shame the company. Here is a list of companies that have done this to me over the years: Rivian, Burlington, Draeger's Supermarkets, Warby Parker, General Atomics, Panasonic, Glass House Farms. Story 27. It is less risky not to follow up. It only takes one person interpreting a rejection letter the wrong way to cause major problems, financially or otherwise. It is detrimental for everyone. Story 28. My wife has forced me into enabling her cuckold fetish by threatening to take away the kids and my brand new Kawasaki 2023 Mule 4010. I often spend time out in the pasture on my Mule 4010, scrolling through Workday and reviewing the applications that Peggy from Human Resources forwards to me. Sometimes I find it hard to focus because I know that Teddy is in my house, eating the banana bread that I baked and flirting with my wife. While I review applications on my Mule 4010, I take my time and make sure I pick the best candidate. Hold on, she's calling me back. Story 29. A company that ghosts you is a clear indication that it is not a good company to work for. Honesty appears to be lacking in its work environment. Story 30. Employers who ghost applicants after interviews. What is stopping you from just sending a simple yes or no? Story 31. They are lazy, cheap, and avoidant. They also want the option to call you 6 months later to ask whether you are still interested if they need to fill another position. Story 32. The organization is not required to provide a reason, but the real reason is often that applicants failed one or more pre-screening criteria. Rather than issue a frank rejection, employers sometimes stop responding to avoid potential discrimination lawsuits. Story 33. Unfortunately, there is no accountability for treating candidates poorly. Story 34. I try to send a personal rejection to every candidate I interview, but my workload is overwhelming and I sometimes forget because other urgent priorities take precedence. I am not proud of this. Our system sends a template email, so at least it is not complete ghosting. Story 35. I see employers looking for employees like a dating app. Most applicants are men, while most employers are women. When employers have too many options, they become apathetic and think the grass is greener elsewhere. When someone has fewer options, they usually invest more time and effort into potential matches. Men, as applicants, generally need to sell themselves to appear appealing. Women, as employers, must evaluate candidates. When options are abundant, selection criteria become harsher and many applicants are effectively ignored. Story 36. I wish I knew. I did 3 interviews and shadowed for a 12-hour shift at one workplace. I never heard anything after that, and I was absolutely gutted. Story 37. Job postings and job openings. Although this may seem counterintuitive, when markets require growth, the perception that you are not hiring can lead an equity analyst to conclude that your company will report weak earnings, and this can hurt your stock price. As a result, companies sometimes post job openings with no intention of filling them. This practice depends heavily on the industry, but it does occur. Story 38. It is a legal matter. If they tell you why they did not pick you, there is greater potential for a hiring discrimination lawsuit. They have been trained by the legal department that there is less risk in saying nothing. Story 39. Usually it is a combination of oversight and timing. Someone higher up decides not to fill a role in the days or weeks after interviews, and the decision never filters down. Story 40. I once told a candidate that he did not have the specific experience we were looking for. He argued with me and threatened to turn me in and call the local news channel. I assumed he would go away, but then he published a nasty article about me and my firm on his website. Most of it was fabricated and he sounded foolish. That site was one of the top results on Google for many years when you searched my name. Needless to say, I now ignore applicants that I do not choose to interview. Story 41. Providing a reason gives someone ammunition for a human rights complaint. A person without arms might sue for ableism if you do not hire them for a job that requires lifting heavy boxes all day. Or if the job is a woman modeling leotard bunny suits for a boutique for women, men may show up just so they can sue for sexism if you say women only. Other applicants and management can take an eternity to respond to the hiring manager. Story 42. I assume applicants are shotgun applying everywhere. I do not receive applications tailored to the posting, and many do not reply when I message them. Less than half show up for the interview. I know what most people will say: you should pay more or offer better benefits. I am offering better than most in my field, which is blue-collar work requiring minimal training or experience. I post a help wanted ad on Indeed and get spammed with quick-click applicants who apply to dozens of other jobs and then wait for the best offer. They do not care about receiving a rejection from me, and they rarely communicate when I reach out. Story 43, corporate worker here. You get hundreds of applications for every job. Human Resources filters them down for the hiring manager. But there is no way Human Resources could write each applicant a personal letter explaining why they will not be moving forward. Some companies send automated responses. Others do not respond at all. I once applied to a startup and made it through 3 interviews before they hired someone else. They sent me a page-long, thoughtful letter explaining exactly why they chose the other candidate. It was awesome. I wish every company could do that, but there are simply too many applicants these days for it to be practical. Story 44. They usually call only if you are hired. They probably do not want to make many phone calls. Story 45. I have conducted several interviews at the small company where I work, and I tell candidates that we have a few more interviews to complete and will notify them afterward. I am not part of Human Resources. I am an engineer who interviews candidates and whose recommendation is considered. After I give a yes or no, I do not know whether Human Resources contacts the candidates. I can request that they do, but I have no authority over them, so I hope they notify the candidates. Story 46. I assumed they have too many applicants to respond. If I don't hear back within a month, I assume I didn't get it and see no reason to wonder why. Story 47. I am a hiring manager. If you get past the recruiter interview and speak with the hiring manager, getting ghosted when you are not hired is, sadly, a 50-50 outcome. Most larger companies use databases such as the Enterprise Project Management Office and Workday Human Resources system to manage recruiting and interviews. If the interview does not result in a hire, the manager checks a box, makes notes explaining why, and the candidate usually receives an automated email. Some companies have a written policy and follow it. Others do not. There is no consistent rule. For some positions, a recruiter may receive several hundred applications, and about 90% are unqualified. When a job requires a specific certification, many applicants without it apply in large numbers. People are often desperate, but applying without the required qualification is a sure way to be added to the ignore list. Story 48. I would rather ghost someone than come up with some bullshit as to why they did not get a second interview. Laughing out loud. Story 49. Does it increase shareholder value to follow up with an unsuccessful applicant? If not, there is no business reason to follow up. Story 50. Good question. If or when it happens to you, remember to leave a nice review about your experience. I did. Story 51. I was ghosted at an interview. I waited 30 minutes. I probably dodged a bullet since it was Wells Fargo. Story 52. When hiring, candidates who do not pass the initial screening interview automatically receive an email. If a candidate is selected, all other candidates who passed the initial screening also receive an email. It is a little impersonal but efficient. Story 53. General stupid use of artificial intelligence to replace hiring a highly qualified individual to save perceived costs. A perfect example of complete nonsense intended to seem cool and modern in today's society. Story 54. Initial application and first round. Okay, there are a lot of people, but if I have made it through 3 or 4 interviews, give me a fucking phone call. Story 55. 1. The person exaggerated on their application, resume, or cover letter and wasted everyone's time by applying. 2. The interview went poorly, and the interviewer did not want to communicate with the candidate again. 3. They are human and unorganized, and you may have fallen through the cracks. This happens especially when you interview many candidates for one position. 4. The interviewer had poor experience with callbacks and rejections. You gave them the impression you would be someone who does not handle rejection well. 5. Someone who should not be in charge of hiring is making hiring decisions. Many people just do a job to have a job, do the bare minimum to get by, are not paid enough to care, and are supervised by unpleasant bosses. Some of these people work in human resources and may not provide callbacks. Hiring managers, human resources staff, and bosses are all people who exhibit normal human behaviors. They are not immune to mistakes or common behaviors often discussed by Reddit users. I will admit there is a percentage, likely much smaller than Reddit assumes, who are trying to game the system by claiming they cannot hire employees so they need foreign labor or government assistance. Read these responses with a grain of salt. Story 56. I'm not a hiring manager, but I have worked with many hiring managers over the past decade. Sometimes the manager of the department that needs a new hire goes on vacation for 2 to 3 weeks, returns overwhelmed with projects and catch-up, and the hiring process is delayed. It is not a yes or a no. It is simply delayed long enough that the candidate likely moves on. Other times the department pulls someone from a less busy team to help, and that temporary help becomes permanent. While the role is temporary, the hiring manager cannot decide whether to hire, and the application sits in limbo. I have also seen companies receive so many applicants that they do not want to pay for software to send mass rejection emails or to pay an employee the hours required to send those emails. So candidates receive no communication. And sometimes the message just ends up in the spam folder. Story 57. I have to keep them on the back burner in case the better choice falls through. Story 58. They do not have time to follow up because they are busy answering AskReddit questions. Story 59. If I speak with someone, I personally follow up with an email letting them know. Story 60. The one time I spoke up, I was exasperated with my company's wishy-washy behavior and knew I couldn't keep my mouth shut about it. Story 61. I used to be part of this process in a chain restaurant. We generally never confirmed a denial because someone denied one day could get a call the next day. It depends on what is going on in the store. We might have had 10 interviews for 2 open positions and offered the job to 3 of the 10, assuming one wouldn't work out. One might not show for orientation, or someone might quit after the first day and not show up on day 2. Then they would go back to the interview list and start accepting more people who were worth a chance. If we ever confirmed a denial after an interview, it was a hard no. Story 62. Laughing out loud, I applied to a company I used to work at in a slightly different position. I knew everyone on the committee and we got along well, or so I thought. I did not even receive a personal rejection. Story 63. Keeping someone on the hook indefinitely is more beneficial in case the first hire backs out and a backup is needed, compared with giving applicants the closure of rejection. It is a buyer's market, and they are happy to accept a 2% convenience increase for themselves at the low cost of an 80% increase in anxiety for applicants. Story 64. To them, you are a resource, not a person. They do not call you back for the same reason you do not tell store staff when you decide not to buy an item. They assume no response is necessary. Story 65. To be honest, I am busy and sometimes I forget. I do all the hiring for my facilities. For the last position I hired for, I had about 30 applicants. I interviewed 10 over a 3-week period. I called probably 6 of them back to tell them no, hired 1, and totally forgot the other 3. If the interview was terrible, I am less likely to prioritize calling them back. I am not proud of it, but for goodness sake, make a little effort to get the job. However, I am ghosted for interviews much more often than I ghost others. People set up interviews, call the day of asking to be reminded of the time, then do not show up. Conservatively, I would say 50% of candidates do not show up for scheduled interviews. So it is a two-way street. Story 66. I was usually the ghosted, not the ghost. I worked for one truly awful place where I was getting both "you could be fired at any minute" vibes and an instruction to quickly and more or less unilaterally fill a vacant position on my soon-to-be former team. When I interviewed candidates, one man was an unusually good fit, but the problem was that he would be leaving a stable job of many years for what looked like a great opportunity on paper but would have been short and terrible for him, as it had been for me. He seemed earnest, which would have made it hurt more. I wanted to tell him the job would be terrible and that I could not stand the place, but you cannot say that. So I ghosted. Knowing he would not understand, in that one case ghosting was kind. I hired another man who was between jobs and had much less to lose. We worked together for a month before I was fired. They treated him as if he were my employee even after I left. Sidelined him. and prevented him from doing much. They paid him for almost a year before firing him as well. Story 67. The volume of applications is high. Recruiting and hiring usually must be done on the side while still completing daily tasks and meeting goals. I sympathize with applicants who do not hear back, but I also must protect my own sanity. Story 68. I work in a job that is mostly part-time for high school students, or nearly full-time with relatively low pay for adults who lack the skills for higher-paying work. To put this in context, the head office will not let me stop accepting applicants, even when we do not need anyone. In those cases, I do not decline applicants immediately. I keep their applications on file until we need more staff. We have improved as a workplace lately, but when high school students leave for college, they usually quit and we need to hire quickly. I do not think applicants will wait to hear back before moving on. Because of this, some applicants go unanswered for 3 to 4 months. Now that this is my responsibility, I want to change the process so that if we are not hiring after 1 month, I will inform applicants. Story 69. Have you seen how much people complain about every possible variant of a rejection email? Story 70. Many people are crazy these days. Why follow up once you discover that? Story 71. The only time I did not was when the company instituted a hiring freeze and the Human Resources Department specifically instructed me not to. Story 72. Ghosting is corporate laziness dressed up as professionalism. If you can schedule 5 interviews, you can send a 2-line rejection. Respect costs nothing, but leaving people hanging saves them the effort of admitting they wasted your time. Story 73. The last time I was hiring, we received 50 resumes per week and rejected 40 of them outright. I am not making 40 phone calls or sending 40 emails to explain why a resume was unsatisfactory. The automated system sends a rejection letter, usually written by lawyers, that says nothing useful except that you were not chosen. If you pass that hurdle and a recruiter contacts you and you go through any part of the interview process, you should receive a written follow-up. However, the message will usually only say that the company has gone in a different direction. When it comes down to 3 or 4 finalists and one is chosen, there is often little the others could have done differently. They were qualified but did not fit as well as the selected candidate. I have served on multiple hiring committees where the chosen candidate was not my first choice. Decisions can be a toss-up and depend on subjective fit. Even after a final round, you may not receive a rejection letter until the chosen candidate actually starts, because that person might accept a different offer or receive a promotion. Employers keep 2 or 3 finalists on the back burner unless they require an answer by a deadline, in which case they send notices. When you receive that rejection letter, it will use corporate language to say something like, "We liked you, but you were not the right fit." If you receive no rejection letters at all, the company may not use automated systems, or you may not be checking your junk email folder. Story 74. I tell applicants that if they do not hear from me by a specific day, for example, if I interview Monday through Wednesday and choose someone on Thursday, they did not get the job. I have not had any problems since. It avoids awkward conversations and lets applicants plan so they do not put another job or interview on hold. We usually hold quick interviews because it is a restaurant. There is 1 round, and if we like a candidate, we usually hire them. I am honest that we have many interviews scheduled over the next couple of days. Story 75. When we do not select a candidate, our applicant tracking system automatically sends a decline message the next day at 4 p.m. Most of the time, the notification about a portal message goes to spam or the candidate does not check their email. Story 76. I was forbidden by the company's Human Resources Department from sending an email or leaving a voicemail to inform the candidate that we had selected another candidate. I had to call until I reached a person. I could not leave a message asking for a return call. It was very frustrating. Story 77. It is not a human resources problem. It is a system problem. Some companies have systems that digitally track a candidate's progress. In those systems, when a candidate is unsuccessful, the record must be closed and the system sends a generic email. In most companies, recruiting is a manual process. In those organizations, human resources staff have no incentive to do that. Human resources staff are measured by the number of successful closures. Once a candidate is unsuccessful, staff often forget them because they are no longer useful to the process, so they remove the candidate from consideration. Any time spent with an unsuccessful candidate takes time away from other tasks. Story 78. I was part of a startup, so I am not sure if this applies. We were worried that saying something could be interpreted the wrong way and make us liable to lawsuits. It is often easier to say nothing. It is unfortunate, but in the end we sent a few emails to applicants after some review. Story 79. Small business employer here. I keep every applicant informed, but I am a small business that interviews 5 to 10 applicants for each job listing. My question is, why do applicants schedule interviews with small businesses and then ghost us? I have had 4 do that the last time I needed to hire a new employee. This time, thankfully, everyone except one showed up to their interview or informed me well in advance that they could not come. Still, one person ghosted me after I had confirmed with them the day before. Story 80. Most people do not fit into yes or no. Most people fit into maybe. Saying no means a clear rejection with a specific reason. That may not be the case. We have not rejected you. We think we have found a better candidate than you, but we would not know for certain unless we have worked with them. If they do not work out, we can contact you or consider you for another opening. That typically does not happen because firing people is difficult. Perfect candidates we would definitely hire and horrible candidates we would definitely reject are very rare. Story 81. This was not human resources. When I worked for corporate, it was often due to recruiters not checking their email or posting positions when managers were undecided about firing someone. Occasionally, the company also posted multiple positions to appear busy. Story 82. I see no reason why they cannot send out a mass email that reads the following. Thank you for your recent interview. Unfortunately, we have decided to go with another applicant. We will keep your submission on file and will let you know if we have another opening in the near future. It is trivial to do. Story 83. I do not have time. I am a person like anyone else. You expect us to be gods. If we find a better candidate, we try to notify everyone, but that does not always happen. I am just happy we found someone. I do not need to review any more resumes or call anyone. I will attend to other tasks. Story 84. In my previous role, when I first started, I used to provide feedback. Because of the hostility I received when rejecting candidates, I switched to giving a date and time when they would hear from me if I was moving them forward. Most reasonable people who want feedback accept it and use it to improve, but many people immediately argue. Hiring was only a small part of my job. I did not have the time or energy to debate candidates, and I felt immense relief when I joined a new company and no longer had to deal with that. Story 85. At one of my jobs as a manager, my hiring application would not allow me to notify candidates that they were not selected. Thankfully, after a few months, we implemented a better system that worked perfectly. I sent rejections immediately after interviews if the candidate was not a fit, and an artificial intelligence tool scheduled interviews until I closed the position. Story 86. I have read that many already know whom they are going to hire, while others are still collecting applications to sell applicant data. Story 87. It depends on their systems. If they are too lazy to tick the email option, that is a red flag. If they cannot be bothered with that, imagine what the workplace is like. Story 88. I do my best to reply to everyone I interview, but sometimes I forget. As a restaurant manager, if I am interviewing, we are probably already short-staffed and need to hire as soon as possible, so I am generally stretched thin. Story 89. I've ghosted applicants before, not because I wanted to, but because I was running a company and drowning. When you're the owner, you're juggling 10 things at once. Keeping projects alive, putting out fires, chasing clients, and managing the team. Hiring is important, but it's just another spinning plate. Add sudden business priority changes or a candidate dropping out, and the whole process stalls. Then shame kicks in. Months pass, and I assume applicants are furious. By the time I should send a late no, it feels embarrassing and unprofessional. Meanwhile, new fires demand immediate attention. So I push hiring aside and keep grinding on the next crisis or opportunity one can't refuse with the limited attention I have. That's how ghosting happens. Normally, I kept the process applicant-friendly. 2 short interviews, a paid take-home test, and a decision within a month. But sometimes things went wrong at the last minute. Strong candidates showed up, others backed out, or the pool didn't fit. My advice if you're an applicant: assume the process is already damaged. Keep playing other tables. If you think you're a perfect fit, send one smart follow-up, but don't burn your emotional stamina. Protect it for the next opportunity. That's the messy truth, and I know that's on me. Story 90. I work in academia and receive many applications every year. I split applicants into 3 categories. 1. Good candidates. Invite for interview and then answer yes or no after the interview with feedback. 2. Candidates who put effort into the application but are not a good fit or not strong enough. Reply with no and a few words of feedback. 3. Mass applying candidates who clearly did not spend 5 seconds on the application. I already wasted time reading the material you submitted. Why should I waste more time responding? Example: looking for an electrical engineering postdoctoral researcher to work on a 1-year industry project requiring expertise in power system dynamics. Why would you think a person with a Bachelor of Science in economics and no experience in the area would be considered just because they graduated from our university 6 months ago? Why would you expect me to call you for an interview or even reply to you? True story. He complained to human resources and they also ignored him after forwarding me the email. Story 91. Recently, we had a role open and received about 90 applications for a finance position in Northern England. Applicants ranged from highly relevant candidates to biochemists and to people who claimed to have degrees and experience in other countries and who still live there in different time zones. We do not have time to reply to every applicant, especially when some are clearly unsuitable. Story 92. I usually ignore applications that are low effort or obviously generated by artificial intelligence. Story 93. I don't do hiring, but when we were a small company, I helped with hiring occasionally. At first, the barrier was time. Then we got software that made it easier. I suggested we notify all applicants we had passed over. As expected, we received few replies, but one applicant reacted angrily. He was upset he had not been selected or interviewed and said he would take his 50,000 Instagram followers elsewhere. The role had no use for Instagram followers. We decided not to send those notices again after that response. 2 years later, he reapplied and the system still had his previous message in his profile, so we did not call him. There is another issue when staffing. Sometimes employees are overworked and sometimes they have idle time. You do not want to overstaff and pay people to do nothing, but you also do not want to overwork them. Hiring decisions are often urgent and you may not have time to post a job and wait weeks for quality applicants. One solution is to keep an open job posting and only hire when you have a real need. That way you can draw from a pool of recent applicants and qualify candidates faster. You can hire someone in 3 weeks instead of 6. It is a strategy some companies use. Story 94. I hired once and received 72 applications. You wouldn't believe the number of unfit candidates in that particular case. Still, all but one responded. Story 95. Volume and effort for limited reward. The brand is damaged, but because every other company follows suit, it becomes the de facto standard. This is not a morally or justifiably correct position, but in the corporations I have worked for in information technology and telecommunications, it is the default response. Story 96. Everyone is busy. Each person is doing the workload of 2 people. Sending rejection notices to hundreds of people is not a top priority. Story 97. I receive over 100 applications per week and hold 10 to 20 interviews easily. Reaching out to all those people would be very time-consuming, and I would gain nothing by doing so. Story 98. I have never understood why employers cannot spend 30 seconds sending an email to unsuccessful candidates. Story 99. I was told they just forgot, which is rough. Story 100. Probably because they have 200 applicants and do not care about courtesy. Story 101. They do not want to deal with angry replies after rejections. Story 102. They'd rather leave you hanging than admit they moved on. Story 103. If you apply and then hear nothing, It is likely because the company has already found a candidate and did not close the job in their system. No one is reviewing your resume. Unless they are running sophisticated software that automatically rejects applicants without human review, it still takes human intervention to reject a candidate. If you interview with the company and are then ghosted, it likely indicates problems with the hiring manager or the human resources process. Story 104. I guess some employers treat job applications like bad Tinder dates. They just ghost you and hope you move on quietly. Story 105. When the job posting clearly states that qualifications A, B, and C are required and you have none of them, then fuck you for wasting my time. Story 106. When I was a manager, much of it was a human resources mandate to avoid possible lawsuits. In retrospect, this was a collective fear that may not have been realistic. At 2 jobs, upper management specifically told me not to tell applicants no directly. The fear, as described to me when I was a young manager, was that if you directly told people no, they would ask why. If you said the wrong thing, they could sue the company for age, sex, or race discrimination. Saying no was considered confrontational and could make people belligerent. People act like this is a new thing. I cannot think of any time since the 1980s when I was rejected and told why. This happened in retail, office, and information technology jobs. Even when I called back, I was told no decision has been made. If they do not want you, they simply cease all communication. Every job, every time. Story 107. We are panicking while trying to find help. It is not a good excuse, but it is a reason. Story 108. At my old job, they were afraid to give any ammunition to someone who might sue. If one person said we went with someone who had more experience, it could be interpreted as you are too young and we are discriminating based on your age. Story 109. Time-intensive onboarding is a major red flag and often signals deeper organizational dysfunction. It prioritizes appearances and vanity in the orientation process over care for the entire employee lifecycle. This behavior can indicate a toxic or immature company culture, where high turnover is masked by flashy welcome processes. Leadership focuses more on optics than substance and treats people as disposable once they have served their purpose. Story 110. I guess they are overwhelmed with applications and cannot respond to everyone if they have already found what they are looking for. Story 111. Sometimes you were a second or third choice, and we have to wait to see whether the first choice remains. But it is the job of human resources, and I am not allowed to. Story 112. Sometimes it's because of the software. If I get more than 49 rejections, I must go through a separate menu for each rejection to send the email. I have attention deficit disorder. Larger companies have no excuse, though. We use budget software because we earn 6% profit in a good year. Story 113. They work in human resources. We are talking about people who lack the personality to earn a competitive wage at Buffalo Wild Wings. Story 114. Probably because human resources is in charge of hiring, and every person I have met who works there is totally useless. Just a guess. Story 115. I work in human resources and made a personal commitment to reply to all applicants. Keeping as many people as possible in the hiring pool can be beneficial. If we do not reply, we can later claim we were still considering a candidate despite the delay. Before a decision is made or if the team wants to trial a selected candidate, they may keep your application open. My more considered approach is to update open applications every 1 to 2 weeks with the status of the application. This effort may yield no benefit other than giving a candidate closure, which is why some human resources teams do not do this. The reality of human resources, like many other professions, is that they may not make the effort. For example, once a successful candidate is hired, human resources has achieved its immediate goal. Sending rejection emails to unsuccessful candidates may be seen as low priority. If a manager does not prioritize this ethically or procedurally, the task can be viewed as a drain on time. This reflects the culture and processes of the organization. While it stings, when you get ghosted, you have likely avoided an organization that would not treat you respectfully. If they do not care about people in the application process, they probably do not care about their employees. They may view people as tools for profit without regard for how their actions affect individuals. It is a sad but true reality. I choose to work in human resources at a place that values people. Even if I cared and my organization did not, I could be reprimanded for spending time replying to unsuccessful candidates instead of performing work that adds monetary value. Not all human resources professionals are indifferent. Many are constrained by the same corporate priorities as the rest of us. Story 116. I recently worked on designing a new applicant tracking system for a company that was struggling with those issues. Their applicant tracking system was so outdated that applications would get lost, and some were never even opened. It is often due to problems like that. Story 117. There are thousands of applicants, and you do not get paid enough to follow up while juggling day-to-day responsibilities. I am hiring someone, not acting as a therapist for thousands of people seeking closure. Story 118. The number of unqualified applicants far exceeds the time I have to respond, even though the job listing clearly states the minimum requirements. It is one thing if someone sends a resume directly. It is more frustrating when sites like Indeed require me to fill out detailed postings and then allow unqualified candidates to apply, filling my inbox. If I invite someone to interview, I follow up after we make a hiring decision, but I do not respond to every applicant. Story 119. For legal reasons, the less I say, the better. I interview 3 people a day. Expect a call within 72 hours. Otherwise, assume we are not interested. Story 120. Public school districts are notorious for this. I always told my students that the adults acted more like high school students. I interviewed for 2 roles outside the classroom multiple times but never received an official yes or no. When I gave 3 months' notice of my resignation, they never contacted the 5 people whose resumes I had provided. They hired someone who had previously been laid off for failing to obtain certification, and less than a year after I took over my classroom and program, I learned that person had been escorted off campus. Story 121. Indeed sends me 100 applicants for 1 open position. Half of them are not even interested in the field or did not intend to apply. Of the remaining applicants, half do not respond. From the final group, I may get 1 suitable candidate. 6 hours later, I receive another 100 applicants. Story 122. There were too many tasks and not enough time in a day compared with the number of things to do, and many tasks were lower in priority. This was not because we lacked human resources. Story 123. High volume and overwork. There are thousands of artificial intelligence-assisted candidates who did not take the time to read the posting. If I respond, it gives them an opening to keep emailing back. I have other job duties and do not have time to deal with all of that. Human resources handles this more and is likely more jaded. After interviews, I sometimes take longer to respond if a candidate is not the top choice but is still being considered. Once I know a candidate is not a good fit or an offer has been accepted, I inform the other candidates. If there are multiple strong candidates, there may be a delay while we seek approval for another position. It is tempting not to reply because it is painful to deliver bad news. I imagine many people find it easier to ignore applicants. Story 124. Laziness. What is the point of sending 1,000 emails when you could just send one? Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.